individual who shot at the police officer was on $1,000 cash bail, a $1,000 cash bail. His charges were 3 counts of sexual abuse of a minor under 12 years old, and he was out on $1,000 bond.
Cooperrider show. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it. As always, please make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening to this on Facebook, comment, share, like, of course. Also, as well, please text the word Liberty to 33777. Once again, text the word Liberty to 33777. Today, I'm going to be joined by Judge John Reynolds to talk to us today about law and order, a bit about his race, a bit about what's going on, but also, too, about the rising crime that we're seeing all across Kentucky as a whole, and in Fayette County and Louisville and just kind of in general. So please also make sure you guys check out my campaign website. That's C4KY.com, C4KY.com. So please also as well make sure you are sharing this with your friends and your family, and make sure you're sharing the campaign with them too as well. And I really appreciate it. And so far, without further ado, I want to bring on Judge.
Hey, Andrew. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Judge, why don't you tell us a little bit about tell us your legal background, your judgeship background, and what's going on with you now before we get down into it.
Sure. So I'm a graduate of the University of Kentucky College of Law. I graduated in 1997 and been practicing for about 25 years. In 2018, I was asked to be considered as an appointment to the Fayette Circuit Court by Governor Bevin's administration, and I accepted that appointment, and I served in 2018, was reappointed in 2019, and then during COVID, moved down to Garrard County, where we're living now, down near Lake Harrington, and practicing law in Jessamine County at my office there. Still have a little office in Lexington as a satellite, and running for judge to be back in the circuit court for Jessamine and Garrard County.
And so real quick too, your experience as a circuit court judge, what do you cover there? So for people who don't know, and obviously you and I know what a circuit court judge goes, but some people listening know what the differences are between family law and circuit court law, and those kinds of things. So what kind of cases did you oversee as judge, and for what you're running for now, Judge?
So as a circuit court judge in Fayette County, and any county, circuit court jurisdiction is felonies, anything that's punishable by a year or more in prison, up to capital murder. When I was in Fayette County, I presided over capital murder trials, the worst of the worst, unfortunately. And then litigation, anything over $5,000 in litigation is handled by the circuit court. Primarily, circuit court judges deal mostly, the majority of the job is criminal. It's the criminal prosecution of felonies. So that's probably 75% of what a circuit court does. The other 25% is settling legal disputes. It is the highest trial court in the state. So if a litigant is unhappy with what a court does at the circuit level, their remedy is to go to the Court of Appeals in Frankfort.
So what is, out of all the cases you oversaw, what is the most striking one, most memorable one that comes to mind that you're like, this case here really was made a mark on me, was interesting to me, or was impactful, or you saw what was good?
Well, two without naming names, two of the most involved trials I was involved, presided over, I should say. The Marine that was killed at Austin city limits up in Lexington over by Woodhill. That trial, we qualified a jury for the death penalty. That trial took, I believe, 4.5 weeks. Very intensive case. And then there was another case that I think we tried. It was maybe 2 weeks or 10 days. Medical malpractice case involving the injury of a young child at UK hospital. Those two were very time consuming and very serious cases, and both were tried in Division 4 of the Fayette Circuit Court.
Now, to frame in why this is an important question for people who don't know, judges have an 8-year term, and in Lexington or Louisville, there's many judges, but in Jessamine and Garrard, there's only one judge. In Louisville, I think has 14, 15 judges.
There's a bunch. There's 5. I was one of 5 in Fayette Circuit. So depending on what division you drew when you got indicted,
division does not mean physical location. That's just your seat number, right? Your court number.
Right. So when an indictment gets filed, it could end up in one of 5 divisions, and you might get a conservative judge, you might get a liberal judge. That's just kind of the luck of the draw for those people, I guess. But
so somewhere though, like Jessamine and Garrard,
one.
If you're involved in kind of circuit court, you're generally in front of maybe one or so judge, right?
So you're one of one down here.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So for those who are unaware, you have to have been practicing law for 8 years in order to qualify for a judgeship. So you've built up a practice, and let's be honest, lawyers make money. And so you built up this practice, and it is a risky proposition because when you practice in an area, of course, you hope judges would never let the fact you run against them change their outcome, but you are hearing cases in front of this judge. But there's a lot to risk there, right? And so you've got to practice, you've built up. It's a pay cut. It's an 8-year term. It's not something you just try out. What made you want to be a judge in the first place and then be a judge, run again now?
Yeah, so I am not a career politician. I don't even consider myself really a politician. I was not, I didn't file to run to become a judge. What I did was there was a vacancy, and some people suggested that I might want to put my name in for that, and that would be something that would be worthwhile. And certainly it is a pay decrease. We don't pay our circuit judges enough, but it's public service. So the reward is serving the public and giving back to the community where you're from. I don't look at it as a career choice. Certainly after 25 years of practicing law, I'm satisfied to continue to do that, but I wanted to do something more. And that's not, it's more rewarding than just, representing clients and filing lawsuits. It's giving back to the community and public service. So I got to, doing that in Fayette County, I found that 1, I really enjoyed it. I liked the challenges. 2, I've got a lot of comments and people that supported me and thought that I was doing a good job, and have encouraged me to keep going in that direction. So that's why I'm running now.
So we had mentioned on the intro about the rising crime. We've got crime rising in Lexington, crime rising in Louisville. We've got our rural areas experiencing record drug issues. Of course, they're having rising crime where it feels like it's not as safe anymore. Coming from the aspect of a judge who's oversaw these criminal cases and see what's going. What is your take? What is going on, and how do we fix it?
The concern that I see just on, Facebook and talking to people in Lexington, for instance, they say, well, the crime's really bad. We know about the amount of shootings and deaths that have occurred in Lexington, and that's getting a lot of news. People are talking about council members. People are blaming the mayor and the different community leaders or elected officials in Fayette County. But what they really need to be looking at is the judges. It's the judges and the prosecutors that are making the decisions, and those are the people that keep the city safe. That, by letting out people that have violent histories on no cash or low cash bails, they're putting officers at risk. They're putting families at risk, and they're putting anybody that's in Fayette County at risk. So we need to look at who we're electing to these positions, because they really are the gatekeepers. And although, the elected council members and Linda Gorton certainly, rule and vote on the financing and the administration and the decisions regarding the police department, but it's the judges that are letting the criminals out of jail. It's the judges that are responsible for keeping the public safe. And that's really what that job is about. It's about public safety.
Now, is there any, so you're talking about how judges are causing the issues. Keep a little more in depth in there, and maybe give examples of what judges are doing that are creating the community to be unsafe, or the prosecutors. What are doing exactly? We hear these things about, these liberal prosecutors or Soros prosecutors, or some, of course, thought that this new prosecutor in Lexington, Angela Evans, I guess is her name, is a Soros funded prosecutor. But what is it that prosecutors and these liberal judges are actually doing that it is leading to crime issues?
So in my opinion, this is just my opinion, the prosecutors in Lexington have been good at their job. Larry Roberts, Luana Redcorn, they, as everyone knows, they are leaving, they're retiring. So we have new prosecutors coming in, but they've done fine, and their offices have done a good job. We're in for a change there. So I don't know, that remains to be seen what's going to happen with the county attorney's office and the Commonwealth attorney's office. The most enlightening example of how the judges are affecting just the police and Fayette County residents. We were going back and forth a couple weeks ago over this issue when there was an officer involved in a shooting in Fayette County. I think he was shot. He was shot and injured. I think he was shot in the leg. He survived. He returned fire, and he killed the individual that had pulled the gun on him during a traffic stop. Well, I heard from several police officers in Lexington that told me that individual who shot at the police officer was on $1,000 cash bail, a $1,000 cash bail. His charges were 3 counts of sexual abuse of a minor under 12 years old. And he was out on $1,000 bond. And that was out of unfortunately, my old Division 4. Judge Goodman put him on that bond. So the police were very concerned about that type of bond, that type of pretrial release, if you will. It's a concern. The scary thing is that's the one case we know about because an officer was involved and there was a fatality. But that probably goes on consistently every week, and the public doesn't hear about it. It doesn't make the news because nobody knows that they're letting out on such bond. And when I was given a speech last night to a group, and they were asking me about specifically those type of issues, and I asked them what they thought a reasonable bond would be for a person that was charged like that. And of course, all people are presumed innocent, and they have the right to trial, and they can get bond while they're awaiting trial, but it has to be reasonable to keep the public safe. And I asked the group, there's a group about 20, I said, what do you think the reasonable bond would be? And they said $500,000, $1 million. And I held up my finger and I said, one. They said, what, 1 million? I said, no, 1,000. And certainly everybody was shocked, and it's just completely inappropriate. It's unreasonable. That's part of the problem in Fayette County. And unfortunately, judges like that who release dangerous people out on the streets are going to end up getting somebody hurt. And luckily that officer, I think he's going to be okay, but certainly he was severely injured.
So what is it that, I mean, what is their motion there? Like why? So the judge is just sitting there. You've got a guy before you who's accused of sexual assault minors under 12, 3 counts, right? And what is the standard? I guess how does it normally set bail? Obviously, it's somewhat based upon how much money they have. What is the philosophy that's supposed to lead how you set bail? Let's first that.
Sure. So in Kentucky, we don't have bail bondsmen. That was done out 40 years ago or more. We have pretrial services. So pretrial is the reference to the department name. Pretrial services. That's a state level, and what they do is when somebody gets arrested, they interview the defendant. Let me turn that off. They interview the defendant and they set a bond. So they look at their history. Have they failed to show up for court before? Do they have ties to the community? Do they have relatives in the community? Have they been working a job? And then are we talking about a violent crime? Are we talking about a property crime? Are we talking about drug possession? What level of crime it is. So you look at all those factors, and then you meet with the pretrial services officer. So in Fayette County, the pretrial service officer would come to my office, and we would sit down at my desk, and he would have a report on each one. And then we'd talk about each one, and we set a bond, which, one, kept the public safe, but two, allowed the person to make bond so that they could be out awaiting trial, because they are presumed innocent and everybody's entitled to a bond. But it must be reasonable. So that's how it gets set. Why are some judges? So in the case I just explained to you, if they would have drawn Division 7 and you got Judge Taylor or Judge Travis, that bond would have been a lot higher. It wouldn't have been $1,000. I can tell you. But liberal judges who, I guess want to feel sorry for certain people, and they're going to set a low bond, a ridiculous bond like $1,000 on 3 Class C felony charges, and let them back out on the street.
So is there, so in a couple episodes we talked about, and I just know, one, legally, is it possible? Because I've talked to people about it. And then 2, what's your thoughts on it? It almost seems like that kind of behavior out of a judge is criminal in this matter. And we have instances of that here in Lexington too as well. I remember a couple months ago, there was the gentleman guy, gentleman who he got arrested for attempting to stab somebody, and then was out the next morning on a low bail, and then went into work, stabbed somebody. And so we have those examples. We have a judge that we're saying, hey, here's a habitual amount of times they're doing it. Is there a kind of actual liability? The victims of these people they're letting out, can they sue the judge? How much does the qualified on the judge work? Can we overcome that? And then on top of that too, we talked, obviously General Assembly can impeach judges if they have recorded failures to carry out jobs. But what's your thoughts on that there?
In that situation, the only remedy is the ballot box. Judges are elected, and circuit judges are elected every 8 years. That's a very narrow window in which to vote somebody out. But they have certainly not qualified. They have complete immunity from lawsuit for any sort of activity like that. I mean, you couldn't sue if the officer got injured. Who got injured couldn't sue and say, well, judge, you were negligent. They would have immunity. So there's really no remedy. You would have to act very, very badly in order for the Supreme Court to remove someone from office or to be impeached in some form or fashion. Basically, it's just the ballot box that's going to fix that.
Yeah, because we see down in Florida where DeSantis, he recalled a elected prosecutor for not doing their job. And like I said, I know here in Kentucky, I believe the General Assembly can just about impeach anybody other than a legislator. As far as that can remove judges as well, but I didn't know if how that all I guess kind of plays out for us as far as the liability aspect of it goes. How far their immunity goes. That's why those elections are so important. Gotcha. Okay, so you're running for office there, and Garrard. What's going on front? Like obviously, when you run for office, you're trying to replace somebody, right? So clearly, as you said, you're not a career politician, so you're not just doing it because you want to feel special in office. You clearly see something's wrong and you want to fix it. What is it that's going on, Jessamine and Garrard? What do you think you can deliver back to the people of those counties?
So I'm going to have a different perspective than the current judge does on these bonds and probation rates and just some of the new tools that are being used that we used in Fayette County that aren't being used here. A couple examples is the Administrative Office of the Courts has spent millions of dollars in developing and creating an e-filing system so that lawyers and individuals can e-file from their office. Any pleading, they can file a lawsuit, they can do it all online. They don't have to go down to the clerk's office. They don't have to make copies. It's all immediate. And for whatever reason, our judge hasn't done that. He hasn't. We can e-file, but the court is not signing any orders, is not processing any orders. When I was in Fayette County, if you were in court on a motion hour on Friday and I said submit the order, I would e-file. It would be e-filed by that afternoon, and I would e-sign it in the afternoon, and it would be immediately entered by the clerk and in the hands of all the parties. So here, if that were to happen, you would mail in the order, or you would bring it to the clerk's office, or you would e-file it. The clerk would have to find it, print it off, a hard copy, bring it to the judge, get the judge's signature on it or stamp, and then copy it, put it in however many envelopes, however many people. I mean, sometimes there's 20, in the certificate of service, you're sending it to 20 people or 3 people. You've got to make copies. You got to do the envelopes. You got to do the postage. You got to mail it, and then you got to wait on the mail. So it's laborious. It's not fiscally responsible just from the postage and the material and the manpower. That's something that is done every day in Fayette County and in all the counties across Kentucky, but for some reason it hasn't been done here, and it's just a time-saving and money-saving manner, and it's efficient for the litigants and for the attorneys. You're not waiting on the mailman to bring you an order. So that's one change.
Thoughts on the drug court?
So I'm not a fan of drug court. The specialty courts, from a PR perspective, they sound great, and people seem to have favorable perception of them. But if you've been involved in the system and you're watching what happens, I think they're a waste of time and certainly resources. We have in Lexington, this is in district court. We didn't do this in circuit court. There's drug court, there's veterans court, there's a mental health court. And basically what that means is, for people that don't understand, it's just a committee of people. So you have like a lawyer, you've got a social services clinician, you've got maybe a judge or a member of the community, and a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and you just kind of all go around the room making comments on how somebody's doing, and I think it's wasteful. I think that one judge can handle all of that themselves. We don't need to have all these other people involved in the process. We elect our judges for that reason. We shouldn't have this shared responsibility and put this up to a committee of unelected people to make these decisions about somebody's liberty and somebody's progress. So they sound great, but in reality, I think they're expensive, and it's more of a PR thing than anything, frankly.
All right, couple more questions, okay? And this is more out of curiosity. Do you believe that judge races should be partisan? As in that the judge should indicate their party on the ballot. So do you think it should change to partisan? Obviously, because I think that judges clearly bring some sort of partisan beliefs to them, to the bench. But, like I said, that'd be a constitutional change. That'd take a vote change. But, what are your thoughts on making the judge races partisan here in Kentucky?
They're nonpartisan.
Well, they're partisan whether people want to, accept that or not. I mean, look at the Supreme Court appointments. Do you think that's, they're supposed to be nonpartisan too, right? They're partisan. When you're out campaigning and you're knocking on doors and you say, hey, I'm Judge Reynolds, I'm running for circuit court, the first question they're going to ask you typically is Republican or Democrat. People want to know. In some states, Texas, Louisiana, it's just two that I'm familiar with, it's right there on the ballot, your R or your D, and people know, hey, am I voting for a conservative? Am I voting for a liberal? Am I voting for, hopefully they know that they're pro-life if they're Republican, or they're pro-choice if they're Democrat. But that's certainly the standard in other states. I think Kentucky's going there. And the reason I say that is in 2018, there was a Sixth Circuit opinion by Judge Thupar, who's a Trump appointee. He's a member of the Federalist Society. He ruled that Kentucky's code that held you could not announce your party. We were told you can't even announce it, meaning to say you can't put on a bumper sticker, I'm the conservative Republican. Judge Thupar found that Kentucky rule violated the First Amendment of the Constitution. So since 2018, and we see that up in Northern Kentucky, there's I think Judge Winter, that's the case, Winter v. Wolfenack. Judge Winter, I believe, is running as a conservative. There's Judge Fisher. He's running as a Republican conservative. So that's the trend. And, I think it's probably going to get there. But certainly there's been major change in the law just in the last 5 years. So I think it's going to get there. But, to kind of wink and nod and say it's nonpartisan, it's not. I can tell you it's not.
I was actually talking to Fisher just the other day, I think like yesterday, about this. And you'd mentioned that in Ohio, they have nonpartisan judge races, but they still had a primary where, like, Republican, if you're a Republican judge and you went through the primary, but when you were put in the jail, they just didn't put a party indicator in their name. But it helped everybody kind of know, and they did that changing the constitution of the state. It helped everybody kind of know this is the Republican judge because they went through the Republican primary. This is the Democrat judge because they went through a Democrat primary.
Well, that's very interesting, and I won't get it right, but to paraphrase Judge Thupar, he basically said, "Look, Kentucky, if you're going to have judges take the robe via the ballot box, right? They're going to take the bench through the ballot box. If you're not going to appoint them, then you're going to elect them. Then people need to know, and people have the right to know who they're voting for, and candidates have a right to know." Or right to announce, rather, what party they stand for. And certainly, if you tell me you're a liberal or you're a Democrat, I immediately know, okay, well, this guy's pro-choice. He's for all the democratic principles that we see that are ruining this country right now. So, it's an obvious and clear indicator of where somebody stands on social issues. And for a judge, I think it's important to know those things.
What do you think the most difficult thing running for judge for office is? Because obviously, when you're running for office, as I have for legislator or for a more typically thought out of political position, maybe that's it. Maybe even more paid to attention position. We get asked different questions and else, and it can be difficult. One of the things that, and this is a note more so to the listeners, was a poll done recently. This was a few years ago for a Kentucky State Supreme Court race, and they did a poll to figure out what was the most important issue to voters in that race. And the number one issue, Kentucky Supreme Court, was illegal immigration. Okay, and a Kentucky State Supreme Court doesn't really have much to do with. And that can be obviously difficult. And sometimes I'm sure you find yourself talking about things a judge really can't even address that voter kind of wanting to talk to you about things like that. But what's the most frustrating and what's the most rewarding thing about being judge for office for judge?
Well, it's very difficult to run for judge. And there was an article that came out and featured or quoted some of the Fayette County races, I think maybe the district court race. The title of the article was, and I'll send you the link to it, something about the judge doesn't need your vote or something like that. And basically what it was saying is in Kentucky in 2022, 76% of all circuit judge races were uncontested, and only 23% were looking at a challenger out of the whole 120 counties, and I think there's 170 something circuits. So, and the reason that is, and the article goes on to say, is when you're the challenger, it's very difficult because you're not wearing the robe and it's hard to raise money. When you're the judge and you have the robe on, it's easy to raise money. And the article basically talks about how difficult it is for challengers to raise money against an incumbent judge, and then how difficult it is to even decide to take on the local judge.
Well, and judges are allowed to ask for money for their cane. There's like this weird whole law thing. I don't know. Maybe you obviously can explain it. What is the rules with judges?
Sure. So the rule is if you are a candidate or you are a judge, you cannot directly ask for money. So you cannot call your friends, like, if you're running for state representative or state senate, you can't call your friends and say, hey, can you help me out? It's a terrible job to have to ask for money. And it's really hard to have somebody else do that for you. I mean, if you can imagine. So it's difficult. It's difficult. And I think that's something that will probably change as well. Because
it just kind of seems silly that you can call, but you could take somebody else and here's a list of friends.
Right.
Call and see if they'll support. And they could call and say, hey, do you support them? Yeah, great. And they can ask the question, do you want to give money? Right. And so, which is just kind of weird. I guess it's based upon the idea of not being able to buy verdicts or things like that was kind of the thought process behind it.
I guess it's not it doesn't make a lot of sense, frankly. But
no, it doesn't at all. So one final, I guess thought from you here. No one reason why people live in Jessamine and Garrard, or not even just Jessamine and Garrard. Let's say where they live at, everywhere they live at. Number one is, and hopefully they see that judges' elections have consequences, maybe even more so than some other elections in your area. Certainly, I'm sure the officer who recently got shot is thinking about how much consequences was from a certain judge election. But why people vote for you, Jessamine Garrard, right? Fine and close argument there. And then two, why should people in general just kind of care about their elections, and how do they find out? What tool should you say people should do to go research the judges running for office in their area?
It's extremely difficult to research and understand who the candidates are. So, for instance, right now in my race or in Fayette County, if a concerned citizen said, "Well, where do I go to learn about how this judge, what his probation rates are? How often does he probate people or she probate people?" You would have to do a deep dive into the administrative office of the courts data statistics and pull they're out there, but the common interested voter is probably not going to be able to find that stuff. So the next thing they'll do is they'll ask a lawyer, "Well, what do you think about this?" or "What do you think about that?" That's not a great way to do it, because we're all human. We all have our likes and our dislikes, and somebody may be a good judge, but if they don't like them personally or they ruled against them one time, they're not going to tell their friend, "Hey, support this guy." So, it's very difficult to find the information. I think that begs the need for party affiliation so that they know who they're voting for.
Also sounds like we need to put together a nonprofit called like Judge Tracker KY or something that digs into that.
Yes. Now, they don't do this anymore. They stopped in December of last year, but it started with Ray Larson. They used to post on the Commonwealth Attorney's website up there the probation rates for all the judges, and then Ray would go on and post them on Facebook, and people would say, "Oh, that's too liberal. That's too tough," or whatever. That was the only way that I'd ever seen in a shareable, accessible format where people could find out how the judges were on certainly criminal issues. But for some reason, Luana's office stopped doing that at the beginning of this year. But again, it didn't matter. There's just not a lot of available information out there to learn about a judge. Why they should vote for me? One, my record in Fayette County is strong. I'm the person that is going to hold somebody accountable for their actions. There is a time for mercy. There's a time for second chances. There's a time for giving people a break, but there's also a time for accountability. And I think what we see in Fayette County is we're just not holding people accountable for their actions. So, unfortunately, if you look at the crime maps, certainly the Highway 27 corridor, we're seeing more crime. We're seeing more movement in from Fayette County into Jessamine County and down into Garrard. So, Fayette's just growing, and with that, the concerns for crime and these other issues are going to present themselves here, just like they did in Fayette. And unfortunately, Fayette has some very liberal judges that are letting people out on these no cash bails or low cash bails. They're probating people. More likely than not, they're going to get probation in Fayette County. I think over 50% of the time, a defendant on a felony charge in circuit court is going to get probation. That's a case-by-case basis, and you have to look at each one. But I can tell you that I'm going to make sure that we're not letting violent criminals with a propensity to reoffend out on the street on $1,000 cash bond or something unreasonable like that. We're going to keep this community safe, because nobody's going to want to live here and start a business or raise a family in Jessamine County if the crime rates continue like they are. So we've got to it's the bedrock of prosperity. So we got to make it safe for everyone.
Well, Judge Reynolds, I mean, I can tell you my support, of course. And you're speaking my kind of language as a business owner. Now, granted, I don't own a business in Jessamine County, but I own a business in Fayette County, and I can tell you I've had a police about 5 times over the last month, just to deal with various amounts of criminal trespassing, and I had a guy peeing on bushes out in front of food. That I had to leave, and it got a little violent, and I can still carry an extra draw, and asked him to leave because he was getting pretty violent and pretty angry with me. And it's just getting worse and worse, it seems like. And so we certainly need to be electing good judge. And I think Judge Reynolds, you are a good judge. So hopefully everybody in Garrard, you get out, you vote for John Reynolds for judge there. You tell your friends and family to vote for him. Judge, thank you for joining us so much. And hey, I appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks. Well, guys, that's about it for us here today. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Judge Reynolds, once again for joining us. Hopefully, all you guys learned something. I know I did, and have one great day.